Well, hi there, everybody. Just a second. Let me pop open my soda can. Welcome to the show. Whew, I got probably the worst night's sleep last night that I have had in years, um, because there was a cricket in my bedroom here chirping. Not continuously all night, but just off and on, you know? And it would invade my dreams. And I would dream about a chirping cricket, and then it would wake me up, and I would realize that goddamn cricket was still in here chirping somewhere. And I would get out of bed, and I would try to track the noise with my ears and see if I could locate where it was in the bedroom. Of course, every time I turned on the light or started to walk around, it would stop chirping. It would realize that the jig was up. So I actually, this morning, when I finally got out of bed at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I realized it was in that closet right behind me. But I never actually found it. Like, I didn't go in the closet and dig around and, find the cricket. But from just sort of zeroing in on it as it chirped early this morning, I was able to locate it in that closet. Now, I have not heard it all day. So I don't know if it left, if it has relocated to somewhere else in the house, or it found its way outside somehow. I don't even know how it got in here. But there was a point last night when I was just really not happy about not being able to sleep, where I actually thought, maybe I'll just take a couple of pillows and a blanket and I'll just go out in the living room and sleep on the couch tonight. And I'll just let the cricket have my room just for tonight. And it'll be one of those deals where, you know what, you can have it. You can stay here. If I see you, you're dead. But as long as I don't see you, just for tonight, you can sleep here. And I mean, I'm sure some of you have probably made deals like that with friends or members of the family or something who needed a place to stay. But anyway, so that was my night. But I'm doing fine now. Once I got up and I did my workout and I had some coffee and went for a walk, it's like I'm fine. But I just thought that was a story that I wanted to share. So anyway, welcome to the show, everybody. Glad you could all be here. And as always, I will be answering questions submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members first. So if you have something for me in the live chat that you want me to talk about, or especially if you were going to drop in like a super chat or a super sticker or something like that, obviously I would want to notice that and not only respond to whatever your question was, but also thank you for your generosity. So if you were planning on doing something like that tonight, please wait until I get through the pre-submitted questions. And then I will spend the rest of the show after that paying full attention to the live chat. So let's get started with the patron and member questions. And the first one of those comes from Danny K, who says, "Hey, Steve, I'm looking for a good Batman detective story, preferably from a run during the 70s and 80s. What would you recommend? Thanks, hope all is well." Well, there, one of my, it's sort of, it has kind of a supernatural patina to it, but it's also a detective story, and I think it's the second storyline from Legends of the Dark Knight, which would put it in the late 80s, I believe, called Gothic, written by Grant Morrison with art by Klaus Janson, one of my favorite artists. And he often he was an inker for, I think he's still alive, I'm using him in the past tense, I don't know how active he is lately, but he was known a lot as an inker, and he was a great inker, but he would also do his own pencils frequently, and he was one of my favorite Batman artists. So if you've and you may have read it because it's a really famous Batman story, and really well regarded, but if you've never read Gothic, I think it starts with issue 6 of Legends of the Dark Knight, if you want to try to find it in a comic store in a long box somewhere. And it's also been collected as a trade paperback as well. But yeah, Batman Gothic, I would recommend. One of my very, very favorite Batman stories. It will definitely be the subject of an upcoming video in the Best Batman Ever series. I'm not sure when. I don't have it like on the schedule for any particular number or whatever, but But yeah, Gothic is a favorite of mine. And yeah, I would recommend that. Next one is Mr. Angel W. Cabot. Hi, Steve. I see you doing lots of videos about Star Trek and also your political philosophical views, so I'm curious about your writing career. What projects you have in progress or upcoming, including writing for TV and movies? Well, I don't have that kind of writing career. I've never been a professional writer. I've written things and co-written things for like very small, like low budget independent film. But some of which has, played at regional festivals and stuff, but I've never like actually sold a script to a professional production company and, actually written for like a movie or a TV series that anybody would have heard of. So I don't have, there are no such projects. And, let's not forget, even if I did have that kind of career, I would not be working at the moment because, to have that kind of career, I would be required to and would very much want to join the Writers Guild of America, and the Writers Guild of America is currently on strike, and I of course would be in full compliance with and participating in that strike. So I would not be working on anything at the moment, but I am not working on anything regardless, because that's not the kind of work that I've ever done. But I appreciate you asking that and assuming that I must have done something like that at some point, or that I must be doing that kind of work. I'm not, but it's kind of flattering that you would assume that. So thank you very much for asking, and thank you for being a supporter, of course. Some random geek with an idea. Steve, last Ask Away, a member/patron Lynn Kibblemom asked about a Russian member that used to join us for the monthly patron member hangouts, and if he was okay considering what is going on in Russia. I personally contact with Vovacat17, aka Vladimir, as we talk in DMs before, and he is doing fine. He did mention he doesn't get the link to join the hangout since he can't be a patron of you anymore. But if he was given the link with your blessing, he would love to join in the hangout again. He just needs a couple days notice is all. So that is my question to you, Steve. Would you be willing to give Vladimir the chance to come to one of the hangouts to catch up with the gang and to chat again? Or better yet, create a poll on Patreon and for your YouTube members and ask them, because I'm cool with it, and I'm sure that many of your patrons and members would be cool with it too. We don't need to do a poll. I would love to have him come back and join us for a hangout. That would be fine. I know I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to hear from him and to see that he's okay. So no, I have no problem with that. If you wanted to, give him a heads up a few days before the next hangout, which I think will be Sunday after next. Yeah, this coming Sunday is the 17th, so this month it'll be on the 24th. Yeah, like if you wanted to ask if he would be able to join us this month, and then when I post the link to all the patrons and members, if you wanted to pass it along to him so that he could join us, I would have no objection to that. I think it would be nice to see him. And I'm sure it would be nice for a lot of people who remember him or know of him to see him and to talk to him, or just see that he's okay and hear what he's been up to and hear how he's been doing given everything. So no, I have no problem with that at all. And good idea. Brian the Meander Baker or Meanander or whatever, however that's pronounced. Anyway, hi Brian. Steve, great job on your recent video essays drubbing the conservatives. I was wondering what your thoughts were on the lack of support for Biden in the upcoming presidential election and why those arguments against Biden are not being made against Trump. Also, an unrelated question, do you think that Strange New Worlds should introduce other characters from TOS to the series or try and develop some of the characters that they already have? Thank you for your time and effort, and enjoy yourself tonight. Well, thank you, Brian. And thank you for the question and for your support. As far as the Biden thing, I mean, look, there's often an enthusiasm gap when it comes to Democratic candidates versus Republican candidates. Republican candidates, especially in more recent presidential election cycles, have tended to appeal very strongly to the fringe elements of the base and the fringe elements of the party. And that tends to generate excitement and get attention and make the whole candidacy feel very electric and energetic and, something that needs to be paid attention to. Whereas the Democrats are more like, well, here's our guy, and, he's not super worth getting excited about, but we think he'll be pretty good, and he'll definitely be better than the other guy. They're really, in my lifetime, there hasn't been like genuine excitement about a Democratic presidential candidate other than Obama, and really just the first time for Obama. Like when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008, and then he won that election, like that felt like a generation defining moment. That felt like a moon landing. That was like, oh, hell yeah, now we're going somewhere, right? Didn't quite work out that way, but he as a candidate and as a person generated that kind of excitement. People were excited about Bill Clinton for some of the same reasons, because, he represented like a younger generation, and he was at that time not a entrenched member of the party establishment. I mean, politically, he wasn't all that far off from where the establishment of the party was, but he wasn't like one of the made men of the party. He was perceived, and to a certain extent was, an outsider. So there was excitement about Clinton's election in 92 as well, but not nearly as much as there was for Obama, especially among young people. So, that kind of excitement and sort of energetic support for a Democratic candidate, to me, in my lifetime at least, has been the exception rather than the rule. Because Democrats, for all their strengths and all their weaknesses and all the things we can agree or disagree with them on in terms of policy, Democrats usually come across, especially at the presidential election level, Democrats usually come across as the adults. They come across as the grown-ups and as serious people. And, for whatever reason, they just don't bring about the same, they don't inspire the same level of excitement as a lot of the more radical extremist Republican candidates do. And as for your second question, should Strange New Worlds introduce other characters from TOS? No, absolutely not. They have more than enough already. I can't complain because I love the show, and I think the show has done well with the legacy characters that it has brought on. Like, I think the Strange New Worlds version of Uhura is wonderful. And I think its version of Kirk has grown on me, and I enjoy that version of Kirk and think that that's an entertaining and interesting take on that character. But so like I say, I can't complain because it's worked very well. But like if it was up to me, if it was my show, when they started back in season 1, the only characters who you recognize from established like previous Star Trek shows that you would have ever seen would have been Pike and Number One and Spock, and that's it. Everybody else would have been a new character for the entire run of the show. Like, I wouldn't have had any cameos. I wouldn't have had any little visitations by familiar characters. Like, I wouldn't have done any of that. It would have been just the characters that need to be there because they're already baked into the premise of the show. And beyond that, it's all new people for the entirety of the series. But a lot of that is, my own sort of personal philosophy of how to handle that and how to tell stories in an established franchise like that and keep things fresh and not fall back on fan service and nostalgia and stuff like that. So, like I say, I can't complain because Strange New Worlds has done a very, very good job with what it's doing. But if you ask, do I want to see any more TOS characters on it? No, absolutely not. Duwan, I know your favorite Star Trek show is DS9. Is your favorite character a part of DS9? If not, could you name who your favorite Star Trek character is? I think my favorite character is probably Captain Sisko. So yeah, he would be a Deep Space Nine character. Yeah, if I had to choose one favorite character from the entire franchise, it's probably Sisko. I know I have a portrait of Riker on the wall, and I know I talk about myself as being, a Commander Riker fanboy, and I am to a certain extent. But if I really get down and think about it and say, okay, who is genuinely my favorite character from all of Star Trek? I can't honestly say it's someone other than Sisko. As much as I love Riker, it's Sisko. Matt L. Steve, question. So, Steve, I'm mostly a casual comic fan. I've read certain Marvel runs, AOA / House of M, etc., but mostly stick to TV shows and movies for Marvel and DC content. I really enjoy your best soups bats ever videos, as they give a glimpse into comic runs that many may not know about. I was recently watching an hour-long Batman comics video by someone else, and besides all the funny and off-the-wall plot points as they went through 60s to 80s, one thing stuck out as peak comic absurdity. In A Death in the Family, the Joker literally becomes the Iranian ambassador so that he has diplomatic immunity. I had to replay a good 2 minutes to make sure I didn't mishear. My question is, what is your favorite wacky comic occurrence or the most outrageous plot point for Batman comics or DC in general? P.S. Did you know Batman had a cow at one point? With all of his various bat pets, he should start a bat farm. You know, I actually didn't know about the cow. That is new to me. I will have to look that up. That could be potential fodder for an upcoming video. This isn't my answer, but when you mention the plot, when you mention the cow and just sort of like the strange little details that have been a part of Batman stories over the years, I think one of my favorites as far as that is in the 80s and 90s, there was a character named Harold. And Harold was a dwarf who lived in the Batcave, and he was the guy who invented and maintained all of Batman's stuff. He was basically a mechanical genius who designed and built the Batmobile and came up with all of Batman's weapons and stuff. And of course, knew all of Batman's secrets, like knew his secret identity and everything. But he lived in the Batcave, and he basically handled all of Batman's mechanical and technical, R&D work. And he was in the comics for years. Like Harold was part of the Bat family for years. And when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was pretty wild. Like that there was just a dude who lived full time in the Batcave and just invented all of Batman's stuff. And like, that was just what he did. And apparently that's what made him happy. Like Batman wasn't holding him prisoner. Like he wanted to. That was his whole life. That was what he liked. It's pretty wacky. It's pretty wacky. And especially since this was in the 90s. This was during like grim, dark, post Dark Knight Returns, post 1989 Batman movie, like super serious, gritty Batman. Ooh, and there's a little guy who lives in the Batcave who invents all this stuff. It's just something about that. It just, yeah. But as far as like outrageous plot points, it's hard to beat. I think it's 1964. It's an issue of Detective Comics. 320 something, 326, 327, something like that. Right around the changeover into the new look when Julius Schwartz took over as editor of the Batman family of comics and tried to transition from like the silly Silver Age stuff into a slightly more grounded, less goofy tone for Batman stories. And so this was like the last issue before that changeover happened. And it's a story about Batman and Robin being kidnapped by aliens and taken to another planet and kept in an alien zoo. And of course, because they are Batman and Robin and they are masters of escape, they escape the cage that they are kept in this alien zoo. And then they seek out the police on this alien planet. Like they seek out the authorities on this alien planet and turn in the zookeeper who has been illegally abducting people from planets all over the universe to bring to his zoo. And they shut down his illegal zoo operation before returning to Gotham City to resume their quote unquote normal lives as crime fighters. That one's pretty wacky. That one's a personal favorite of mine. That is just, pretty, if not peak Silver Age silliness, then it's got to be pretty damn close. Yeah, Batman and Robin in the Alien Zoo would be my answer to your question. Joe C. Hi, Steve. Today I watched another friend get buried a result of a heart attack. I'm feeling a little low. I remembered a thought from an even older friend. He said that old age is when your best friend is your doctor. He also said to never trust a fart. Relevant to this channel, I remembered my late Irish-American granny. When 10 years old, me wanted to watch Star Trek TOS in the first run on TV. She didn't want me to watch it because Spock looked like the devil. She never forced her religion on me before, and I loved her, so I complied. In the pre-HD TV days, it was possible to listen to the soundtrack audio on an FM radio at the bottom of the FM dial. So to keep her happy, I listened to the first run of Star Trek, the original series, like a Neanderthal. I wonder how that colored my perceptions. That is all. Now get off my lawn. Well, I appreciate that story, Joe. You know what it made me think of? Talking about listening to Star Trek and not seeing it, and also your grandmother saying that Spock reminded her of the devil. I don't know. Maybe you know this story. I think a lot of people know this story and a lot of people don't. The original makeup design for Spock was it had the familiar pointed ears and the familiar sort of sharp slanted eyebrows. But instead of a greenish pallor to his skin, Gene Roddenberry wanted to give him a reddish tone to his skin so that he would look satanic. Like the idea was Spock would not only be an alien, but he would be an alien with an appearance that at first glance, thanks to our human prejudices and our sort of cultural upbringing, we would assume he must be a villain. He would have a very evil appearance. But then, of course, once you get to know him, you realize he's the furthest thing from evil, that he's a very noble, rational, heroic, sympathetic, honorable, admirable character. And it would be sort of a lesson for the viewers, like, see, you take a look at him and you think that he would be the bad guy because he looks like the devil, but actually he's one of the good guys. Leonard Nimoy actually expressed his concerns about this makeup design. Not because he had any objection to what Roddenberry was trying to say, or because he didn't like the point that they were going to try to make, but Leonard Nimoy pointed out that this show, when Star Trek was first being developed, it's like 1964, 1965 when they're shooting these pilots, and then of course it officially went on the air as a full series in '66, and this is the early years of color television. And a lot of American TV viewers, millions of people actually who watched TV, were still watching on black and white TVs, even though the broadcasts were in color by that point. And Leonard Nimoy pointed out to Gene, he said, there are a lot of people who are going to watch this show of ours on a black and white TV set. And when you look at this Spock makeup that you have designed in black and white, the red skin color that you've given me makes it look like I'm in blackface. And Leonard Nimoy said, I don't want to do that. Even though I'm not really doing that, even though it's not blackface, it's red, and it's meant to evoke like, an alien and kind of like a devil character. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want to create the opportunity for that misunderstanding. I don't want to make viewers uncomfortable or make them think they're seeing something they're not that would be offensive to them. So let's do something else, please. And Gene agreed, and they came up with the version of Spock that we now know and love, where he has kind of a greenish pallor, and in black and white, it doesn't really look unusual or, anything like that. But when you see it in color, you see he has kind of a very faint greenish skin tone. And that was because Leonard Nimoy realized that there might be an unintended consequence as a result of the original plan to make Spock look more like a devil than he even looked on TV eventually, that gave your Irish American granny some trouble. So yeah, thank you for that story, and thank you for the opportunity for me to tell that story. I appreciate that. Brian McKinley, hi Steve. There are currently a few lawsuits making their way through the court system to disqualify Trump from either the primary or the general election ballots due to the 14th Amendment. I've heard various experts weigh in on whether it will be successful or not. But my question is, do you think we're better off with Trump disqualified from the ballot entirely, or would you rather have him as the nominee because of his potential to taint the entire Republican ticket in every race, as many have said happened in 2022? No, I'd be happy if he got kicked off. I would be completely content with that. And then if the Democrats were smart, which is, at best a 50-50 proposition in any election, if the Democrats were smart, they could then use that to campaign against Republicans up and down the ticket and say, this is the state of this party. They would have been completely happy to renominate this guy who is so corrupt and such a crook that the courts actually ruled that he legally cannot run for president. Right? They could run on that instead of just running directly against Trump. Because look, the whole idea of, let Trump be the nominee and then the party will collapse because of him being the nominee. I mean, I've seen that movie before. I don't trust that. I would much rather not have him on the ticket at all. Yeah. Black Cover 95, is it bad that I feel relieved when a conservative minority pundit or politician gets shut down due to the bigotry of the rest of the Republican base? And that I feel almost frustrated when one hasn't been canceled despite being one of those people? I mean, I guess it's kind of like Ken Watanabe in the Godzilla movie from about 10 years ago when it's Godzilla versus the other monster and he just goes, let them fight. It's kind of like that. I don't think it's when a, like, let's say a black Republican or a gay Republican or something like that is ostracized from the group, is rejected by the base, what have you. There is kind of a chickens coming home to roost element to it. There is an element of satisfaction in being able to say, hypothetically in your head to the person that this has happened to, well, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Like, are you really that oblivious to the party that you have pledged yourself to? Like, if you are a black person who is active in Republican politics and then you get hammered because of some racist reason, if a bunch of white racists in the party decide they don't like you because you're black, or a bunch of homophobes decide they don't like you because you're gay, are you really so naive that you would be surprised by that? I used to get a kick out of Michael Steele, who you still see on cable news every once in a while. And he used to be like a big time, like, go-to pundit for cable news stations, because he's a black man and he is a Republican, and he's actually the former lieutenant governor of my own state of Maryland. And for a long time, he was sort of, and I guess in some ways still is kind of held up as an example of, he's a reasonable Republican. He's a moderate Republican. He's not one of these nut jobs like, the Trump people. Like, he's not a MAGA type guy. He's a normal fiscal conservative Republican, right? And part of his act, especially in the Trump era, would be to go on TV and just kind of shake his head and go like, oh, what's happened to my Republican Party? And I would always just sort of stare at the TV blankly and go like, dude, what party did you think you were in? Like, how is it even possible? Like, I think that when I see black folks running for office on the Republican ticket now, or when I see gay people or honestly, even women, like even white women, because it ain't, it's, the party isn't acting in their interest either. Like, they'll probably have it better than people of color or queer people. But I mean, it's not, the Republican Party isn't doing women of any gender or any gender identity or sexuality or skin color any favors, like, But I feel the same thing. I'm like, what party do you think this is? What party did you think you were joining? That you're like, oh, what's happened to the Republican Party? I can't believe Republicans would act this way. Where have you been? Like, who'd you think was voting for you all this time? But yeah, I mean, so no, I don't think it's necessary to feel bad about it. I mean, because you're not saying, oh, good, I'm glad that the racists, knocked that guy down. You're not rooting for the racists. You're not rooting for the bigots, but it's just sort of a moment of satisfaction of, see, I knew it. I told you, So yeah, no. And I mean, I have no pity for any of them. David Colby, the Sarah Connor of liking lower decks. That's pretty good. Or are you actually the Terminator of liking lower decks? Because you're the T-1000 of liking lower decks, because apparently there is no stopping you from liking lower decks. I feel like I would have to freeze you and break you into 1,000 pieces and then hurry up and sweep up the pieces before they melted and throw you into a cauldron of molten iron. And then maybe you might not like lower decks. Anyway, I was originally going to whine about Strange New Worlds, but I'm sick of bothering you about it. Instead, I've been rereading a favorite series of mine, Tanya Huff's Confederation series. It's basically what if a thinly veiled XP of the Federation had a Marine Corps, and I really like it. It's fun to read a military sci-fi book that isn't incredibly homo/transphobic and doesn't fucking hate liberals. But man, it really does make me think Starfleet needs an armed forces. Remember when Ensign Deadmeat was like, man, what are we even doing here? I signed up to study comets on Moon Mash when he was talking to Dr. Warcrimes. And I was like, yeah, you shouldn't be here. You need some fucking Marines, dude. The armed forces isn't a job you can do as a side gig while studying to be an astrophysicist. They're both skilled technical jobs, triply so in a universe with force fields, particle guns, and teleportation grenades. So yeah, give Starfleet a Marine Corps, guys. I mean, here's the thing. I see the logic of that from an in-universe point of view, but from a point of view external to the fictional universe, it doesn't make sense, because the show, the various versions of the show, the many shows and films in the Star Trek franchise center on Starfleet. So if you want to tell a war story in Star Trek, and I would be perfectly fine if they never told another war story in Star Trek again. I feel like that's not really where the strengths of the franchise lie. I mean, as much as like I thought the war episode that you're referencing in your question, the war episode of Strange New Worlds this season was excellent, and I think the war stories in Deep Space Nine, for example, many of those are excellent, but in general, I don't think it plays to the strengths of Star Trek to use it to tell war stories. I just don't. I think it works better if you're doing something else with it. But since Star Trek stories are focused on Starfleet and people in Starfleet, if you want to tell a story where the Federation goes to war, it makes more sense dramatically to have the characters in your show be involved in it, which means Starfleet fights the war. Now, again, makes not as much sense from an in-world perspective, but it makes more sense from a creative and whatever I said a minute ago. I've completely blanked on it now. But from an external perspective. From a dramatic perspective. That's the word I used, from a dramatic perspective, because, you want your show to be about the people that your show has been about up to this point. You don't want to say, oh, I've got a great idea for, I've got a great idea for a war story on my Star Trek show, and I'm going to bring in this whole other division and this whole other group of characters to fight the war, and we'll just focus on them for an episode, and then we'll come back to our regulars. Like, I know they did the Makos in Enterprise. I was never a huge fan of that, and I really don't think the Makos added all that much dramatically to the show. But, I suppose if you wanted, like, if someone had an idea for an entire Star Trek series that would just be a war show, which, again, I don't think in theory is a good idea, because I don't think that's the best use of Star Trek. But if somebody had an idea for what they thought was going to be a really great Star Trek show centered on a war or some kind of like, really serious, heavy, bloody, dramatic military conflict. And for the purposes of that show, they wanted to bring in, the Makos or some, more specialized militaristic equivalent of Starfleet, the Starfleet Marines or whatever, then I think that would be fine to do for the purposes of that show, because then those characters would be the stars of the show. You could focus the show on that group and on those people. And I think that would be fine. But for a garden variety Star Trek show like Strange New Worlds or Deep Space Nine or TNG or Voyager or Enterprise or whatever, or Discovery, if you want to tell war stories and your characters are all in Starfleet, then Starfleet fights the war, because those are the characters the show's about. So, and honestly, that part doesn't bother me. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. Wolfie Basach, warning, this question contains extended scenes of graphic violence. Okay, good. Thank you for the content warning. Hi, Steve. A few bedtimes ago, I gave my subconscious strict orders to provide dreams where I married to the fish delivery woman and drifted off to sleep. Or rather, I didn't. I heard an evil buzzing, and turning on the light, I saw a mosquito circling above me, its vampiric eyes fixed on my exposed, youthful neck. The next hour witnessed a barbaric and savage battle between man and monster, where hunter became the hunted as my flat was reduced to a self-catering, recently recarpeted war zone. Eventually, I somehow fashioned raw materials laying around me, and although crippled by exhaustion, with a final desperate lunge, twatted the fucker rather mercilessly, which explains why the Metrons didn't turn up, before crawling triumphantly back to bed. So my question is, what do you think about things with more than 4 legs? Bees producing honey and wasps making chutney is okay, but what about the ones that want to eat us? If I had been able to find that cricket that was chirping last night, I would have killed the shit out of it, because I wanted to get some goddamn sleep. So, I mean, look, I don't go out of my way to kill insects. If I see like a spider crawling around outside, I leave it alone. If I see, bees buzzing around, or even wasps and hornets and stuff, like if they're not bothering me and they're not, providing any danger or obstacle to anything I'm doing, I leave them be. Live and let live, right? But if they start fucking with my shit, they're dead. Like, they're just dead. There's no question. There's no hesitation, and I don't feel an ounce of guilt about it. If I see a bug in my house, and it's not where it's supposed to be, fuck it. All bets are off. I don't think I can't remember if I told the story on a stream or not, but about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, a month and a half, something like that, several weeks ago, I discovered, much to my alarm, that I had a very large hornet's nest under one of the awnings of one of my windows on the outside of my house. Actually, it was this window that is right in front of me here, my bedroom window. And I have no idea, because this was like a fucking like paper hornet's nest. It was like that big. It was like the size of a basketball. It was like a full-size hornet's nest. I have no idea how they built it without me noticing, but somehow they did. And I didn't notice it until I was mowing the grass one day, and I noticed a whole bunch of wasps flying around, and I was like, where are these guys coming from? And I looked up under the awning because I happened to see a bunch of them around there, and I was like, oh shit, where'd that come from? So, I got some nest killing bug spray, the kind that has like the long distance firing mechanism, so you can shoot it from like, 20 feet away. And I waited until that night when the wasps had all come home, and there was no activity around the hive, and I sprayed the goddamn shit out of it with emptied like an entire can of that bug spray into it, and waited a day or two to make sure they were all dead, and they were, and then I knocked it down and got rid of it. And, if I had found it, like if there had been a hornet's nest somewhere else nearby that I didn't need to walk past all the time, or that didn't pose any immediate danger, that I wasn't going to be around, or there weren't going to be other people around that might get hurt or stung by these insects, then I probably would have left it alone. You know, if I see a wasp's nest like in the woods, if I'm going for a walk like on the battlefield or something, and I walk by a tree and there's like a big hornet's nest or something, like, you know, I keep my distance. I don't want to fuck with it. I don't want to get stung. But, you know, I look at it and I go, oh, look, that's neat. That's pretty cool, right? I don't have a desire to hurt them, right? But if they fuck with my shit, if they build their nest on the side of my fucking house, then they got to go, you know? So that's really the deciding factor. Like, I don't have any active like malice against them, but it's like, you can't fuck with my shit. You know, like, I live here. This is my house. You don't live here. Nobody invited you. So all bets are off if I catch you in here. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Shazy, good evening, Steve. I watched ContraPoint's tangent on Gamergate, and there was a segment featuring Camille Paglia. Have you heard of her? She sounds like a real piece of work, whining that Gamergaters were only defending their hobby and are being neutered by feminists, telling women that they need to stop blaming all of their problems on men and not believing the scientific consensus on climate change, dismissing it as a political agenda. That last one really gets me. If you intend to be taken seriously, especially as an intellectual, taking climate change seriously should be bare fucking minimum. Remaining skeptical in the face of overwhelming evidence in regards to climate change strips these contrarian assholes of any legitimacy in my eyes. In fact, this applies to anyone, no matter who they are. What do you think? Is this too black and white? No, I agree with you completely. I used to think something very similar about people who knew absolutely nothing about evolutionary biology, feeling as though they had the necessary expertise and understanding to overrule the overwhelming scientific consensus about that. It's the same pretense. It's the same conceit. You know, first of all, even if you are a climatologist, even if you are genuinely an experienced, educated expert in the field, and you are deciding on the basis of your own expertise to say, oh, the consensus is wrong about climate change. You know, like, hey, you're performing a valuable function. You're challenging you're challenging the consensus. You're challenging the standard thinking, you know, and that's good. That's how science corrects itself and moves forward. But the odds are you're wrong. Like if 90%, 95% of the people who do your job and study the same things you study think that it's one way, and you are one of a handful who think it's the other way, it's possible the handful is right, but probably not. The overwhelming consensus is probably right. And as a layperson who has no like serious understanding of the issue, who has never taken a course on climatology, who has nothing more than a general sort of, you know, popular science understanding of the issues at hand, which I believe would also have been the case for Camille Paglia, to just sort of take it upon yourself to reject the consensus is the height of foolishness. Like, you're not a scientist. You don't know. It would be just like, it would be like going to the doctor and your doctor diagnosing you with a disease, and you say, well, that doesn't sound right. I'm going to get a second opinion. So you go to another doctor, and that doctor gives you the same diagnosis as the first doctor, and you say, that still doesn't sound right. And you keep getting, you go and you get dozens and dozens and dozens of concurrent opinions about your diagnosis, and they all agree that you have the same condition, and you still just refuse to believe it on the basis of nothing but your own imaginary expertise, right? It's the exact same thing. Why even go to the doctor if you think you know everything already? If you think you know what's wrong with you, or at least you know enough to know what's not wrong with you, when a doctor who knows better than you tells you what's wrong with you, why even go to the fucking doctor? And it's the same thing when people when people with no understanding of the forces at play, when people with no degree, no education, no experience, no actual technical understanding of how these things work, just sort of assume that they're qualified to say, I don't think that's right. You know, when every major scientific body in the world, every academy, every scientific organization, they all agree that climate change is real and that it's caused and exacerbated by human activity. For you, as someone with no relevant expertise in those fields at all, to say, nah, I don't believe that. That doesn't sound right. That's the height of, it's not just arrogant, it's foolishness. Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it does rob people of legitimacy when they have no standing. They have no basis to form an opinion. That's why we have experts. That's why we trust people who do have the basis to form the opinion, to keep us informed and to give us guideposts, because we can't know everything. Like, we can't have a complete understanding of everything. So, and I'm not saying you have to blindly trust every single expert that walks down the pike, but in cases like this, where almost every expert on the entire planet is saying the same thing, who the fuck are you to say, nah, I don't think so. It doesn't sound right. Yeah, no. And also, I have heard of Camille Paglia. She was Rush Limbaugh's favorite feminist. Her and Rush Limbaugh were pretty good pals. So tells you something else that you probably could have guessed about Camille Paglia. Agent Meister, who thinks we should nuke the facility from space. It's the only way to be sure. Peldor Joy, Steve, I watched and agreed with almost everything you had to say on your recent Flash video. Unfortunately, comic book movies are going the way of comic books themselves. Bloated, convoluted, company-wide events with a cast of characters, situations, and storylines that few other than the most hardcore comic book readers will get. I grew up on Batman movies and comics, and that little corner of the DC universe suited me just fine. I wish we could get movies that feature one character again and not this extended universe BS. Directors like Richard Donner, Sam Raimi, Tim Burton, maybe, Paul Dini, Christopher Nolan, and Matt Reeves have proven that a well-directed, tightly written movie will leave a longer-lasting cultural imprint than the CGI-driven, fanboy-pandering garbage that is churned out nowadays. All that fucking money floating around Hollywood, and no one can seem to afford decent writers, even before the current strike. Not really a question, just wanted to vent about a dying craft. The really galling part about that to me is there's no reason why they can't do both. I know that, the push to have everything be interconnected, it is similar to the philosophy that led to that becoming the standard model for superhero comics. The idea of, if we do a big crossover every year, then, the readers will feel like they need to buy all of these other issues of books they don't ordinarily read so that they'll have the full story, and the idea is, if we make it a shared universe where everything's interconnected, then they'll feel like they have to go see all the movies. And so there's that. And then there's also the fact that Marvel has done that pretty successfully. So other companies now want to do the same thing and replicate that. And it is a shame because there's no reason why they can't do legitimately standalone movies. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't do a Batman movie like the Matt Reeves Batman, the Batman, which was excellent. That is completely its own thing, that you don't need to have done any homework to understand. You don't even need to know who Batman is. You can just come into that movie and the movie tells you everything you need to know. It's completely accessible. You don't need to feel like, oh, gee, should I have done some reading before I came in? Like, it tells you who Batman is, tells you what the deal is, tells you who he's fighting, who his allies are. It's a movie. It's like a movie. It tells you the story that, they can do movies like that, or like Richard Donner's Superman, or like Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, like all of these great superhero films that are standalone works. They could do those movies, and then if they want to do a team-up movie, they can just do that too. And people who are interested in that, like let's say they do a standalone Batman movie. No shared universe stuff. It's just about Batman. And then they do a Superman movie. No shared universe stuff. It's just about Superman. And then they do a Flash movie like that, and a Green Lantern movie like that, and a Wonder Woman movie like that, and a Harley Quinn movie like that, and a Black Canary movie or a Green Arrow movie or whoever, like whatever, Aquaman. And if all of these movies are good and successful and people like them, then in 7 or 8 years after these movies have come out and they've had a chance to kind of build an audience for these individual films, and also for the brand of like the studio, let's say, DC Studios is like, hey, we made all these superhero movies you really liked, right? Then if they wanted to do a team up movie where all of these heroes got together and did like a big story as a team, they could still do that. It's not like anybody, as long as it was a good movie, it's not like anybody would be in the theater going, well, gee, this really should have been set up in each one of these movies. Like the fact that they didn't tease, that all of these characters lived in the same world and kind of knew each other or moved in the same circles or blah, blah, blah. Like this, maybe there are some fucking just hopeless pedants or pedants who would feel that way. But I think most people would realize, oh, obviously they live in the same world and they know each other because they're in the same fucking movie that I'm watching right now. Like you don't necessarily need to do the painstakingly assembled shared universe in order to get to the team up movie. You can just do a series of standalone movies that people like and that are good, and then just do a team up movie at some point. Like you can do both. And it's a shame that they feel like that Hollywood, again, it's one of these things. Jason and I have talked about this a lot lately on late seating, especially in the uncut portions of late seating that are only available to Let Me Listen podcast patrons. We've talked about this a lot in the past few months about how, there are things that just become conventional wisdom in Hollywood that make no sense. Like Hollywood executives just kind of decide, well, movies need to cost this many $100 million, and movies need to be this long, and movies need to have this many big name actors in them, and movies need this and that, and movies need to be based on a recognizable IP and blah, 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 blah. And if you look back through the history of movies, none of those things are true. And none of those things have ever been true. And none of those things are true now. A movie doesn't need to be any of those things. But, in order to be successful, in order to sell tickets, in order to make money, like a movie doesn't need to be any of those things. But these things, these particular qualities, it's like they're treated as, well, if we're going to do a superhero movie, well, God, that's a big investment. We have to spend, $300 million on it. No, you don't. Well, it has to be 2.5 hours long. No, it doesn't. Well, it has to have this many digital effects. No, it doesn't. It can, if that's what you want it to be, and you do, and you think it will be worth it to spend that money and to do it that way and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's no reason not to, but there's no reason you have to. But Hollywood just gets, it gets stuck in this mindset because it's a creative business run by uncreative people. And these things just kind of happen. They view it, the masters of Hollywood, the masters of the entertainment industry view it in dry dollars and cents, zeros and ones. It's product. It's content. It's a thing to sell. It's the result of an analysis. It's the result of an algorithm. It's something that is assembled as a result of focus groups and analysis. It's not an artistic thing. It's not a creative thing. And when it's successful, it's not because it's told a story that has connected with people or made people curious or excited them or entertained them. It's because it flicked all the right switches, and that's why we run into these problems, I think. So Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, we just had the 22nd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. People say that we were more united then than we are now, but I sort of disagree. Would you say the 9/11 attacks made us more divided? In other news, my Moth screenplay script is now 19 pages long. Well, first of all, congratulations on that. That's fantastic. I think it depends on who you are. I mean, I know there were moments in the aftermath of 9/11 when I did feel like we as a people, we as a country were very united. I remember I was working at a truck stop back then. I was working maintenance at a truck stop in Hagerstown, and I remember when the first Bin Laden tape was released. Osama bin Laden recorded these videotapes. One was a videotape, and most of the rest of them were audio tapes. But there was one. It was a videotape that he made after 9/11 that was basically like a message to the West, a message to the American people, and here's why I did this, and here's what you can expect from now on, and that kind of thing. And I remember them playing it on the news one day while I was at work at the truck stop. And we had TVs in the truck stop that would, play the news or whatever. And when the Bin Laden tape came on, everybody stopped. Employees, customers, everybody. And we gathered around the TV. I mean, just spontaneously, like gathered around the TV and watched in the middle of the sales floor. And we're watching the guy who masterminded these attacks that killed 3,000 people. And I thought, Jesus Christ, it's the scene in the movie when the supervillain addresses the people and makes his demands. You know what I mean? It's like, it's fucking General Zod at the White House declaring that he's taken over. It's that, it's that scene. And we were all a part of it. We were all standing there together watching. And that was a moment of terrible unity. You know what I mean? Of a feeling of like, oh, in the worst way, feeling like we're all in this together and this isn't good, And there were more positive ways as well. Like there were ways in which that it felt like, yeah, we're all in this together. We're going to get through this. But I wonder if I would feel the same way if I were a Muslim American. I wonder if I would feel the same way if I were, if I had enlisted in the military and been, mistreated after I came home, if I came home with, terrible injuries or, some, like severe depression or mental illness as a result of my experiences in Iraq or Afghanistan, and then my government completely failed me and didn't give me the help that I needed, didn't give me the support that I had earned as a result of my service, as was the case of many, many, many people. I wonder if I would feel like 9/11 was a unifying thing then. I wonder if I was one of the people who had been victims of harassment or hate crimes in the aftermath of 9/11, because anybody who was a Muslim or who looked like they might be a Muslim was considered a target by a lot of people. I wonder if I would have thought that we were more united then. I don't think I would, So I say that from a very, very privileged perspective as a natural-born American, white, male, cis-hetero guy, that from that perspective of mine, yes, I remember a very strong feeling of unity in the post-9/11 months and years. Not all the time, but, recurringly, there was a feeling of unity. But that, I think a lot of that is because my perspective is so privileged. There were undoubtedly people in the country, American citizens, and people who, even if they weren't actually American citizens, just people who had every right to be here and had, there was no justification for mistreating them or for looking on them with suspicion, who had a very different, very, much less positive experience. And I don't think they would say that we were more united then than we are now, So, I mean, yeah. I think a lot of that is wishful thinking and looking back at it through rose-colored glasses And even at the time when people would say things like that and say, you know, oh, if nothing else, it's brought us together. It's shown us that, you know, we're at our best when we're facing adversity. Like, I think a lot of it was wishful thinking back then. Wishful thinking or a willful attempt to oversimplify things and to get people to believe that for their own purposes. So, yeah. Dana, who still does too many things. Bonsoir, Steve. You've talked about watching some wrestling from independent companies that publish matches and shows on YouTube. How did you find out about them? You've mentioned that you haven't done any videos about them because, well, they're not all that good. But if that's the case, why do you watch them? And how do the local groups stay afloat? Does it work kind of like community theater? Many of ours either are a 501c3 or are supported by one. And even then, there are regional theaters that tend to have stronger productions, if not quite top tier. So why is there such a big gap in quality between the local independent wrestling shows and the national promotions like AEW and WWE? Well, I mean, the main reason why I haven't done and probably won't do, at least won't do any regular videos about the smaller wrestling companies that I watch is because I mean, there's lots of stuff that I watch that I don't make videos about. I don't make content out of everything I watch. And actually, I mean, even though I love talking about wrestling and will talk about it at any opportunity that is given me and will occasionally make my own opportunities to talk about it because I feel like I have something that's just that interesting to say about it, my wrestling related videos don't do very well. Like, there's not a big portion of my audience or of the audience on YouTube that gets my videos placed in front of them that seem all that interested in what I have to say about pro wrestling. So like even earlier in the summer when CM Punk was still employed with AEW and he was the star of AEW Collision, and AEW Collision on Saturdays was my favorite wrestling show. There were for a few weeks I did videos where I sort of shared my thoughts on AEW Collision. So that's like a primetime national cable TV show produced by the #2 wrestling company in the country, starring one of the most recognizable names in pro wrestling. And I would do videos about that, and I'd get maybe 1,000 people would watch the video. Like, people just didn't give a shit. So even when I talked about relatively prominent wrestling related stuff, relatively prominent and current wrestling related stuff, there's just really not that much of an audience for that for me. I mean, maybe there's other people that talk about it and do very well. There are wrestling-centered YouTubers that have big audiences and do very well. But my audience and my channel just doesn't, for the most part, it does not grab people's attention. So it would not be a worthwhile use of my time to do that. It would be better for me to focus my energies on other things that get more attention and generate more benefit to me. If people don't give a shit about hearing me talk about AEW or even WWE on occasion, I highly doubt they'll give a shit if I talk about, OVW or, Derby City Wrestling or, Memphis Wrestling or the various incarnations of the United Wrestling Network that I watch on occasion. Like, there's just no appetite for that among my audience. It would make no sense to do that. But I mean, I find them because I'm a wrestling fan and I pay attention to the online wrestling community, and you see people post about things on Twitter and on other forms of social media, and you just and you see things on YouTube. Like, I watch wrestling related videos on YouTube. So YouTube recommends wrestling related stuff to me, and I see, oh, I don't think I've ever watched that before. Let me check that out and see if that looks interesting, and there might be something about it that I like, and I'll say, I'll come back and check this out, at some point in the future. And you just sort of build like a portfolio, so to speak, of wrestling content like that. And yeah, how do they stay afloat? How do they survive? I think it's very much on a case by case basis. There are some, especially the ones that regularly produce TV, that have a benefactor, that are owned or supported by a large investor who likes wrestling or believes in the show or has some other sort of interest that's being served by it, that will pay the bills and allow it to continue to put on shows and produce TV. Some of them get by like they operate in small enough markets, and they have a local TV slot that sells ads that covers the costs. And when they do live events in their local area, they sell enough tickets to keep the lights on and pay the talent. And, it works very much like it used to work in the old days of the wrestling business in the territories, where like the business just survives on the revenue it generates. There are some independent promotions, like not usually not the ones I watch on YouTube. The ones I watch on YouTube are well off enough that they can produce regular, usually weekly TV. They're not making the TV every week. They usually do like a TV. They do an event maybe once a month where they tape, a month or sometimes several months worth of TV, and then they edit it and sort of parse it out, as the weeks go on, which again is the way that not all wrestling territories, but certain wrestling territories used to do things back in the old days. They would tape a bunch of stuff in advance and then, dole it out on schedule. But there are some small wrestling independent promotions that will only do one show a month, or maybe one or two shows a month. And again, it's just an occasional thing that like a promoter will do. It's not a full-time job. It's not a full-time business. It's something that they will do when they feel like they can draw a crowd. And that's the way it works. So it's very individualized based on the particular company and the particular region in which it operates and the way that it operates. Are they doing things for TV or for the internet? Are they just putting on shows for live crowds? Are they doing both? It really depends. And there's a gap in quality between the local independent shows and the national promotions because of money. The local independents and even the larger regional independents, for the most part, they don't have any money. And the money not only means that their production values will be inferior to something like WWE or AEW. I mean, that goes without saying, but also they won't have the money to pay the top level talent to come in. Even like the top level indie talent, like those wrestlers, they have, when you build up a reputation on the independent wrestling scene that you are actually like a good wrestler who can excite a crowd, and you have a reputation, and maybe even you've built up a following on the internet, so there are people who will come to that show just to see you. Your price goes up, and as well it should. You should earn what you're worth. But those wrestlers are expensive, and a smaller promotion can't afford them, or at least can't afford them very often, or can't afford them regularly, and also probably can't afford to hire people who are competent, experienced, and effective trainers to, run a wrestling school or train new wrestlers who could eventually get the experience to become that good. Like it's very difficult. It's very difficult to be a good wrestler, and it's very difficult to make good wrestlers, who can become the kinds of wrestlers that will be able to captivate an audience to the extent that, they can be a draw, especially in this era of the wrestling business. So, I mean, it's really hard, and it takes a lot of money. Honestly, the only reason AEW still exists is because it's owned by a billionaire who is willing to dump money into it. I mean, the TV ratings of AEW are nothing to be ashamed of. Like, they are completely respectable. But if AEW had not been owned and founded by a billionaire, it would never even have gotten on TV. Let alone, I mean, you think that TNT and TBS would have put AEW on the air because of the quality of the wrestling? I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are AEW fans. No. The wrestling in AEW is not that good. I mean, sometimes it is. Like, there have been fantastic matches in AEW, and there's some incredible talent that works there, but the talent works there because they can afford to pay them. That's why Bryan Danielson works there. That's why Claudio Castagnoli works there. That's why Samoa Joe works there. That's why Chris Jericho signed there at the beginning And he was like the first major star to come to start with AEW and to sort of put them on the map and say, no, this is serious. Look, we have like a serious guy, right? Because Tony Khan, the owner, can afford to pay those bills. If not for that, that company wouldn't exist. Most of that roster is young green wrestlers who don't know what the fuck they're doing, who can pull off some genuinely impressive acrobatic eye-popping moves, who are tremendous athletes, but don't know the first fucking thing about putting together a wrestling match. And that shows when you watch them wrestle. And again, there are exceptions to that, but I feel like as a rule, that's what the show is. And now that the new car smell has worn off and the novelty has worn off, to me, it's obvious that's what it is. I didn't think that when it first started because it was oh boy, it's the new company. I want to support the new company, the alternative to WWE. But now that it's been 4 or 5 years and you can, the novelty is worn off and you see it for what it is, you realize, oh, this still exists because of the money. Not because the product is so good that it's undeniable. Somebody has to put it on TV. It's because of the money. So it's money. That's what explains the gap in quality. Michael Ridra, there is one comedic beat that both Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks have done repeatedly that gets a chuckle out of me every time. The whole, a Vulcan does something tame, and then either that Vulcan or other Vulcans act like it was a huge outburst gag. Examples would be the recurring gag about Talim being called out of control after calmly disagreeing with other Vulcans, or Spock telling the other crew, I'm sorry you had to see me lose my temper like that after what seemed like a perfectly cordial conversation with that Vulcan lawyer. It's a pretty simple gag. Not particularly clever if you think about it, but it just tickles me without fail. Are there any simple comedy bits like that you can think of, either in Trek or something else that gets you every time? Oh, yeah. Cutaway, not cutaway gags, but like editing gags where you have a character say, you basically have a character say, well, that'll never happen. And then you smash cut to that thing happening. That gets me almost every time. I love that. That's a really easy way to get me to laugh, When someone raises a possibility of something happening and a character goes, over my dead body. And then you cut immediately to that exact thing happening. It just knocks me down every single time. Really, really, really corny stuff like airplane style humor, like I am serious. Don't call me Shirley, or we've got to get these people to a hospital. A hospital? What is it? It's a big building with patients, but we don't have time for that right now. Like it's the corniest, dumbest joke, but that kind of humor, when it is delivered with a straight face, just floors me, and it gets me every time. I'm a complete sucker for it. So stuff like that. Joe McClory, fast, but feel free to answer it as deeply as you are willing. Do you think you would walk away from Omelas? I would like to think I would, and I know it would be a struggle living there if I knew, but I worry I would not, and I would even rationalize that choice. So I am pretty much in the same boat as you. I would like to think that I would walk away. I would like to flatter myself and say, oh yeah, I wouldn't stand for that. I would definitely walk away. But I can't honestly say that I would with confidence. I might be able to rationalize it and say, well, I can't, it would be too much of a change, or I couldn't survive outside of the city, or the benefits outweigh I can live with the guilt. I would like to think that I would walk away, but I can't say for sure that I would. I don't know. I've never actually been in that situation. I've talked about this with Dana, and Dana, always reminds me when this comes up, well, there's the third option. And the third option is the one that is dramatized in the N.K. Jemisin short story, The Ones Who Stay and Fight, which is you don't have to walk away, and you don't have to stay and just accept things as they are and go along with it and reap the benefits. You can stay in Omelas and try to change it. And I would like to think in some very, very small way, not nearly as big or as significant or as effective as other people for sure, but in some tiny little minuscule but still larger than zero YouTube centered way that I'm doing something like that in the real world. You know, that I'm not, I haven't left the country. I haven't left the United States, although I felt like it at times. And there have been times when I've thought, you know, if I was rich enough to leave, I would have left a long time ago. But I haven't. And I don't know that I would or not, honestly, even if I had the means. But I would like to think that I would stay, and I would try to make things better here instead of just walking away or just accepting things as they are. But again, I don't know. You know, it's hard to separate what I honestly expect I would do from self-flattery or rationalization or self-delusion, you know. But I would like to think that I wouldn't just, and that I am not just going along with things. Anyway. Thomas J. Wright, Black Body Economics. I am becoming more and more convinced that the growing lack of deep and meaningful in real life interpersonal relationships is one of the most significant contributors to the growing lack of sympathetic and empathetic mental practices. Mentally walking a few miles in somebody else's shoes is a skill that seems to be disappearing faster and faster. It's unfortunately because that's one of the easiest ways to open a productive dialogue where defenses have been taken down and reasoning centers come online. Peter McIndoe's TED Talk, the Birds Aren't Real faux conspiracy guy, found that he became extremely closed off to individuals that approached him abrasively and ridiculed his faux conspiracy, even though he was just playing the character. Sitting behind a keyboard seems to inherently disengage certain social mechanisms. It's so easy to rage online. Think we'll ever get this figured out? Think it's possible to cultivate sympathy, empathy online, or is it just going to get worse and more divisive? I think some people will figure it out. Do I think that we, as a society, as a species, will ever figure it out to the extent that it is no longer a problem that we need to be aware of? Probably not. Can we get to a point where it's better than it is now? Yeah, and I hope we do. But I think that sort of thing will always be with us in some degree or another, because it always has been. I mean, even before the internet, even before so many of us were spending so much time online and connecting with so many people online as opposed to in real life. I mean, there was still this tendency to dehumanize people, to view the other as different than yourself, as not being worthy of the same respect that you would demand for yourself or that you would show people who were closer to you. I mean, this has always, I think, been a part of human nature. But it has also always been part of human nature to recognize this and to overcome this. And I think we're just as capable of doing that now as we were back then, or as we ever have been. It's just a matter of, as you say, figuring it out. You know, so yes, I mean, I do think it's possible, and I do think we should be thinking about that. I mean, it is always very helpful to remember that the people you talk to online are real people. I mean, most of them. So yeah, you know, some people are bots and some people are, you know, trolls pretending to be somebody else. But for the most part, most people you interact with online are real people. And it's helpful to remember that. I remember once I was talking about something, I forget what it was specifically, but I had gotten some kind of really like abrasive, like offensive comment on a YouTube video, or someone had replied like that to a tweet of mine. And I was talking to Jason about it, and he said it was probably some 12-year-old. And I don't know if it was or not. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe, you know, all the odds are excellent that it was a full-grown adult who had said this. But nevertheless, the possibility that it was some kid mouthing off had not even occurred to me. Like, I mean, once Jason said that, I was like, oh yeah, that is a possibility. The possibility didn't occur to me on my own. I had to have someone remind me of it, you know, and say, you know, it's possible that's just some dipshit kid who doesn't know any better, who's repeating something that he's heard from his shitty parents or from some shitty guy with a shitty podcast that he listens to, you know, and maybe he'll grow out of that. And in fact, I know that from my own personal experience. I often get comments now from people who say, and people now in their early 20s who, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago followed YouTubers who made a not all that modest living off of attacking me on YouTube, and not just me, but other people sort of in the same circle as me, and just saying the most awful things about us and whipping up harassment campaigns against us, and just sort of cultivating just a lot of outrage and hatred around us. And now have grown up and realized, oh shit, that's embarrassing, and have reached out to me through YouTube or through email or something and said, hey, I used to be one of those. I used to watch X, Y, or Z's YouTube videos and think you were the worst, but I don't think that anymore. And I just, want to apologize for, whatever part I played in your, misery. I mean, it was never that bad with me, but it was much, much worse than that for a lot of people. And, it's important to keep that in mind, that a lot of times, a lot of the negativity and toxicity on the internet comes from young people who have been misled because they don't know any better or they don't care to know any better. And that's not an excuse, and that's not a reason for not doing something about it, but it's just something to keep in mind, So, yeah, I don't know. It's possible. It's possible. General Contact Unit Problem Child. A few days ago, we were in a pub together, and my dad said, slightly intoxicated, I don't mean it, referring to the aggressive and ableist shit he said. I just say things I don't mean when I'm angry. What, if anything, do you think is a good response to that? My father has said things like that before, like he thinks he can fly off the handle and verbally abuse people, then calm down and expect everyone around him not to stay mad, because he claims he doesn't really mean the things he says when he's in that mindset. For the most part, everyone in the family and his friends accept that about him, and I'm not sure if we should. It's not like he has Tourette's or something. He managed to hold down a job, so he can restrain himself if he really has to. He just doesn't put in the effort to do so when he's at home or in social situations. I mean, I think that sounds like a good thing you could say to him. I think you could say, look, I understand that you don't mean it. Let's just say I accept. I take you at your word when you tell me, I say things like that when I get drunk or when I get mad or whatever, but I don't mean it. Okay. That's not an excuse. I'm glad you don't mean it. I'm glad that you don't feel those things in your heart if what you say is true. But that doesn't mean you get to say that to me. And that doesn't mean that when you do say things like that to me, that I have to just shrug it off. That's not the way it works. Maybe other people are willing to do that. Maybe other people in the family or other friends of yours are willing to grant you that limitless grace. And no matter how many times you do it, and no matter how many times you fly off the handle and you say hurtful things to them, or you embarrass them in public, or you say something completely out of line, they're willing to grant you that grace and say, oh, that's just how he gets. You're very lucky that you have people like that in your life. But speaking for myself, I don't think that gives you the right to talk to me that way. And I feel like I would like it much better, and our relationship would be much better if you would put in the effort to restrain yourself and to not say those things to me, because it's never acceptable. Something like that, because I think that's the truth. I mean, and you make a very good point. He does, if he's held down a job, if he apparently is not this irrepressible fountain of rage and ableism and bigotry all the time, right? He does have the ability to tone it down and rein it in. So tone it down and rein it in when you're talking to me. Like, I don't think that's too much to ask. And I think there's a way you can say that to him while, you know, being sympathetic to him and being appreciative of what he's trying to tell you. Like if he's obviously trying to make peace. He obviously feels bad about it on some level, or he wouldn't be saying that to you. He wouldn't even bother be trying to tell you, like, you know, I don't really mean it. Like, it obviously has not escaped his notice that this is hurtful to you and this is a problem for you. And his way of trying to deal with that problem is to say, oh, you know, I don't mean it. And that's fine. And it's nice that he at least recognizes that he is playing some role in causing this problem. But you need to say, well, the fact that you don't mean it doesn't make it okay. The fact that you don't mean it, you're still not allowed to talk to me that way. I'm still not going to stand for that. You know? So. Russell. Good evening, Steve. I'm doing this under the wire. Damn, work hasn't given me a lot of time to prepare, so we'll do a fun Star Trek question. First off, I agree with you. A difference of opinion on Star Trek makes great debate and fun conversation is all. I know it's hard to read intent with simply words, LOL. Anyways, I recently watched the TNG episode, The Icarus Factor, and I have to admit I actually liked this episode this time around. Are there any TNG episodes you didn't like the first time around but liked later? Also, second season is way better than people give it credit for. See you soon, Steve. I agree with you about season 2, by the way. Season 2 of TNG is still pretty shaky, but it's way better than people give it credit for. Like, it's still not the show that it would get to in seasons 3 and 4 and 5 when it was like really in the sweet spot and you're like, oh damn, this is a good show. And 6, I mean, it's really seasons 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's like just, oh shit, this is a great show, right? And there are stinkers in there too, but not very many. But season 2, even though season 2 is not quite at that level, like you compare season 1 and season 2, for me, it's no comparison. Like season 2 is worlds better than season 1. Like it's, oh shit, this is much better. Still not where it needs to be and still not, you know, where it gets to eventually. Now that we've, you know, seen the whole thing, we can look back in retrospect, but, so much better than the first season. The first season is so goddamn rotten. You know, I can't really think of a TNG episode that I didn't like the first time around, but discovered a new appreciation for. But pretty much all of the Ferengi episodes on Deep Space Nine would fall into that category. When I watched Deep Space Nine during its original run, I was really not a fan of the Ferengi stuff. I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was interesting. Whenever I saw that it was a Ferengi episode coming up next, like, I would watch it because I was a fan of the show, and I always would watch Deep Space Nine when it was on. But when it was a new episode and it was a Ferengi show, I would kind of be like, ugh. But now I really like most of the Ferengi episodes. As there are episodes of any show, you know, there are episodes that I don't think are that great, but for the most part, the Ferengi episodes I think are really funny and I like them a lot. You know, and the characters that got on my nerves or that, you know, kind of made me cringe or roll my eyes back then, like Brunt or Zek, I think are just hysterical. I love those characters. They make me laugh. So yeah, I think for Deep Space Nine, it's the Ferengi stuff. For TNG, I can't really think of a specific example. I'm sure there are some. I just can't think of any right now. John Burns, have you heard of Journey Quest? They are an independently produced with the help of Kickstarter series on YouTube. It's a very good series, started around 2010 or so. Anyway, the 4th season is about to come out. If you go to Zombie Orpheus Entertainment's YouTube channel and check it out, I like helping independent artistic endeavors such as this. So what do you say? Will you try to watch the first 4 series? I hope you like it. I think it's great that you want to support an independent production like that. I think that's wonderful. And I wish them all the luck in the world. If they want to continue making the show, that they continue producing it and have success. I think that's great. I looked it up on YouTube before the live stream started just to sort of get a sense of what it was because I had not ever heard of it. And there's probably no way I'm ever going to watch that. Like it just does not seem like it's remotely my cup of tea. I don't think I would enjoy it. So no, I have no plans to ever watch that. But thank you for the suggestion, and thank you for bringing it to other people's attention if they might check it out, and it might be their kind of thing. And it's really great that you bring attention to it and that you want to support it. Because I agree. I think helping and supporting independent artists and independent productions like that is very important. So good for you and good for them. And I wish them all the success in the world, and I will not be watching. And finally, from Sent Merc, hey Steve, a few ask-aways ago, I asked about horror Mount Rushmores, and I gave my own, and I put Pennywise the Clown on mine. I'm a regular listener of Late Seating, and you guys haven't covered a King movie or adaptation yet that I can think of, so I really don't know what you think of him or his work in general. Personally, I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of it. So I was curious if you have any thoughts on it, the book, the miniseries, or either of the film adaptations. For me and for a lot of people I know, it was one of our formative horrors because of the miniseries, as poorly as that may have aged. Well, Jason and I have done a Stephen King adaptation on Late Seating. We did review The Shawshank Redemption. But that kind of points to the problem of doing Stephen King adaptations on our show. And I can't remember, we may have done The Shining as well. I can't remember if we've done The Shining or not. I think we have, maybe? I honestly can't remember if we've ever done The Shining before or not. But anyway, but I know we've done Shawshank. But the problem is, most Stephen King movie adaptations are not very good. There are definitely exceptions, for sure. But the average is pretty low. Like there was a period in the 80s and 90s where it's like they were just cranking out these adaptations of Stephen King stories and novels, and they were all just fucking rotten. So, I don't know when we'll do another one or not. But we have at least done Shawshank. I like Stephen King. I haven't read very many of his books. I remember I read The Stand when I was a teenager and thought it was really good. And I think I read the book because that was the year that they did the TV miniseries of The Stand on ABC with Gary Sinise and Molly Ringwald. And I thought that was terrific. Like, I really liked that a lot. I like the book and I like the miniseries. And as far as it, yeah, I'm a fan of the original miniseries. You're right, it hasn't aged super well. It's a little corny. It's a little dated. It's very early 90s TV. I'll put it that way. You watch it and you're like, oh, this was made for TV in the late 80s or early 90s. You can tell by the actors that are in it, by just the sort of the production value and the aesthetic of it. You're like, okay, this is TV. This wasn't no movie. This was TV. But it's fun. And Tim Curry is Pennywise, and of course he's fantastic. So I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun. And I really liked the first movie, where it was the kids. I thought the first movie where it centered on the kids was very, very good, was very well done. The second one with the adults, even though the cast was great, just didn't do it for me. It felt like, they kind of already did this with the first one. Like, I know the way the book works is, they defeat Pennywise as children and then he comes back and they defeat him again as adults. Like, I know that's the story. And that was the idea. We'll do the kids movie and then we'll do the adult movie. Like, I get the concept, but having seen it, I feel like, no, you should have just done the kids one. Like, the story was over and the adult version didn't really add anything that we didn't get in a much better version in the kids version. So it's like, it felt redundant and it just wasn't. And I think the second half was a lot longer too. It was just a longer movie. And it just, again, despite the considerable talent involved, it just didn't work for me. So the first movie I think was excellent. The second movie, not so great. And the 1990, I think it came out in 1990. The TV miniseries was terrific in a very corny, nostalgic way. And I have a soft spot for it. And I never read the book, so I can't speak to the book. But in general, I think I appreciate Stephen King for, what exposure I have had to his work. So anyway, that's it for the patron and member questions. Now I'm going to turn my full attention to the live chat in a minute. But before I do that, there's one more thing that needs to happen, and that is the premiere of a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. So this Stuffy and Friends short, as always, will go up as an independent YouTube short tomorrow on my YouTube channel. But because you are wonderful viewers of this live stream and you have joined me live tonight, I will show you a little sneak preview of it. Tonight, you get to see the new Stuffy and Friends short before anybody else. So please enjoy the latest Stuffy short. Okay, 20 questions. Let's make it interesting. $20. You ask, I answer. I take away $1 for every question. If you guess right, you keep whatever's on the table.
Why do you have $20 in ones in your wallet?
Never mind. Okay. I'm thinking of something. You all set?
It wouldn't be fair for me to take your money like this.
Bit presumptuous, aren't we? Don't worry, Stuffy. You're not getting one of these dollars. Whenever you're ready.
Is it a person?
Yes.
Is it Patrick Swayze?
God damn it!
You were right. I didn't get one of them.
He outsmarted me again. Oh, ooh, that damn dog. He outsmarted me again. Anyway, hi everybody in the chat. Oh, everybody loves Stuffy. That's good to see. I love Stuffy too. He's my favorite. Okay, let me make use of this new feature in the live chat, and I can look at just the member messages and the super chats that have been made while I was answering the patron and member question. So here's one from Shreyas Shrivastov, who says, love your movie reviews, especially the ones where you drank at the beginning. Will we get more of those? Also, thoughts on the very first VFX union forming at Marvel Studios. Feels historic, to be honest. I probably won't do any more of the drinking ones. I feels like that's something I did years ago and that I've kind of moved beyond. But I'm glad you appreciate those, and I do really like that gimmick. That is a nice sort of visual shorthand to let everybody know, like, oh, I really didn't like the movie, and now I'm going to do a Jaeger bomb to demonstrate that this is what I need to do to be able to review this movie. But I probably won't do any more of those. And yes, I think it's great. The first VFX union forming at Marvel Studios. I think it's, yes, I agree. Historic and long overdue and very important. John Burns with a super chat says, how does one torture O'Brien without war stories? Oh, seriously? You abduct him to Cardassia and put him on trial for a crime he didn't commit. You replace him with a duplicate who thinks he's really him. You trap him in a time loop where he watches himself die over and over. You have his daughter get lost in a time vortex and come back as a wild feral child, 10 years older. There's all kinds of ways. You infect him with a deadly, possibly incurable disease. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to make O'Brien suffer without war stories. And then here's another one from John who says, red face, okay, black face, bad. 60s were so, well, yeah, for the Leonard Nimoy thing, yeah. Yeah, well, of course, and red face that people might look at and think of as blackface was also bad, so. And here's one from Cranjus McBasketball. I noticed the Ferengi episodes in DS9 come right after the particularly heavy episodes in my last rewatch. Almost like that show is a banger or something. Yeah, like they're smart enough that they realize fans maybe might need a little breather, you know? So they put in some goofy ones in, you know, to break up the super serious ones. Okay. Let's see. Yes, Daryl. Yes, Jack Tripper and Dr. Frankenfurter for the TV It miniseries. Absolutely, it's a great cast. Seal0626 says, "Have you seen either of the very short treks? Personally, I think they're atrocious in just about every way that matters, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts if you have any." I thought they were both hilarious. I understand that the problems that some people had with the first one. You can interpret the first one as being sort of a joke about how much of an imposition it is to be respectful of people, because the joke is that the captain uses these sort of common English idioms that are offensive to people on the bridge, because they're like he says, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And the cat lady who's on the crew turns around and says, "What? You skin cats?" And he says, "Not now. We have bigger fish to fry." And then the fish man turns around and says, "What?" And, that's the joke. And it is very easy to interpret that as sort of a complaint of, oh, you can't say anything anymore, So I get that. I understand that objection. And I don't think that is an unreasonable read on that short, and it's problematic for that reason, but I thought it was funny, and especially the bit at the end when they kind of get away from everybody's offended joke, and it goes into Pete Holmes sort of reeling off his fantasy for the woman he's trying to conjure who will love him for who he is, and he describes all of these just fucking man-child things that he wants her to be accepting of, and he goes off on his little rabbit trail about, and she won't mind it if I like to watch old game shows because I just find it comforting, the music and the color palette. And, I thought that was really funny. And then I like the second one too. I thought the second one was very funny as well. So I've liked them both. I'm not really sure. I mean, humor is very subjective, and, not everybody thinks the same things are funny, so I wouldn't expect everybody to think they were hilarious, but I thought they were funny. Daryl Letts, she's like the wind through your tree. 255 AD says, I read the short story that's the thing from the monster's perspective. The final line was the thing deciding it's morally obligated to assimilate the human race. Because we suck that much. We suck that much that he's like, okay, I need to do something about this. Oh yeah, Geek. Yes, Perfect Blue. Yeah, Perfect Blue is the new episode. Yeah, I think that just came out today. Our new episode of Late Seating. We reviewed Perfect Blue. Absolutely, which I had never seen. This was my first time watching it for the podcast, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. So yeah. Steve Schmeling says, "Hey Steve, I'm confused. When you left your bubble, why didn't the bartender serve natural ice?" I think he just had like a personal objection to it. I think he felt that it was an inferior product, so they refused to serve it. I think that was the main objection. It's funny. I think I mentioned this I think I mentioned it on Twitter when I retweeted that video the day after I initially posted it. We're talking about the video I put up on Monday where it's the little skit where I walk. I'm watching Fox News, and the Fox News host basically says, it's a shame that people stay in their bubbles and they don't travel to other places, because you could meet people who maybe disagree with you politically, but there could be other nice things about them. So in the video, I say, gee, maybe I should get outside of my bubble. So I get my 1930s hobo bindle, and I walk down the road, and I walk all the way from Hagerstown down to Alabama, and I walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "What can I get you?" And I say, "Do you serve Coors Banquet?" And the bartender says, "The only thing we don't serve here is," and then he starts to say the N-word, and then the edit cuts him off, and I come back with my hobo bindle, having done my due diligence, and I sit down and I delete the Fox News app from my TV, and I'm very happy to remain in my bubble. There are two incredibly unrealistic things about that. The first unrealistic thing is that I even had the Fox News Channel app installed on my TV at all. In real life, the only reason why the app was on the TV was so I could get the shots I needed for the video of me deleting it. That's the only reason it was ever there. Of course, I would never have the Fox News app on my TV. So that's the first unrealistic thing. And the second unrealistic thing was that I had to walk from Hagerstown to Alabama to hear someone say the N-word in public, because I could hear that right here. Like I could go to any random bar in Hagerstown where it's, you know, white people who hang out, and, you know, within a few minutes I'll hear the N-word. It's not, unfortunately, I hate to say that, I wish that was not true, but it's really not that uncommon. So yeah, those are one very, very depressing thing that is not accurate about that video. Did I get the second part? I did not get the second part, 255 AD, at least not that I can see. Yeah, I did not get the second part. Yeah, Dana, see, you read my mind. You read my mind. I didn't have to go that far. Yeah, you know, Geek, Jason has seen a lot of Satoshi Kon movies. Again, I wasn't familiar with him until we watched Perfect Blues. Jason is an admirer of his work. If I think about it, you know, I'll try to check some more of those out. Because yeah, I like Perfect Blue a lot. And Kirak asks, have I ever seen Mississippi Burning? Yes. I like it. I mean, it's a good movie. It has it has two of my favorite actors in the entire world in it. It has Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe. So, I mean, and it's really, it's a well-made movie. The problem I have with it, and it's not necessarily the movie's fault, it's more a fault of the cultural context in which the movie was made. It's a movie about racism where white people save the day. And, you know, I feel like hopefully we as a culture have moved beyond that and have realized that if you're going to tell stories about racism, that you should center the people who are affected by the racism. They should not just be props in white people's stories. So, you know, that is an issue I have with it. Again, not necessarily the fault of the filmmakers. Like it's a lack of vision, but it's a lack of vision that is a result of the cultural context, of the sort of cultural blinders that white people had on back then, and you know, to an extent still have on today, but hopefully we're more aware of them now. That it seemed like, well, you know, it seemed like there was nothing at all wrong with telling a story about, you know, the horrible effects of racism that centered white people and not the black people who were actually the targets of it. But yeah, no, Mississippi Burning is a good movie. It's a very good movie. Dana says, will there be a Best Batman Ever about the wacky alien zoo? Yeah, I'll probably do one at some point. I mention it in a Best Batman Ever that I've already done. Actually, the one I did, because I mentioned in my answer, that issue happened right before the changeover, the editorial shakeup in 1964. So I mentioned it in that context. I did a Best Batman Ever video about like when did the Batman comics change perspective from Earth 2 to Earth 1, right? Because there's not actually a universally agreed upon solid line that says, okay, this issue was the last regular Earth 2 story, and this issue was the first regular Earth 1 story, and that's the dividing line. Like it's a much fuzzier boundary. So I mentioned the Alien Zoo story in that context, but I don't go into detail about it. I don't give like a lengthy summary of it. So I might do a video that expands on that, because it is a really fun story. Like it's just like I said earlier, it's the height of Silver Age wackiness in Batman. So I may very well do a video just about that. Okay, here's the second part of 255 AD's question. And thank you, Geek, for posting it. And I see 255 AD posting it on his own as well. The thing reads the mind of a human it's taken over and says, savage creatures will never accept salvation. I will have to rape it into them. Does that sound gratuitous? Yeah, to our modern ears, I think that sounds gratuitous. I think it probably sounded less gratuitous back when that was written. But it sounds gratuitous now, yeah. Steve Schmeling says, wanted to tell you that thanks to you, I started watching Perfect Strangers again. Oh, thanks for reminding me of that show. You're welcome. I love Perfect Strangers. I watched an episode of Perfect Strangers just the other day, actually, because it's streaming on Freevee, the ad-supported Amazon streaming service. Yeah, love Perfect Strangers. Michael Handeline, any updates on you doing a video on my adventures with Superman? No, I want to do one at some point. I do want to do a video about it, but I don't have one on the schedule right now. But I mean, I'm going to get around to doing one eventually, because as I think you know, I really, really like that show. But I've had my hands busy with other things. So, I haven't had a chance to really think about it yet. But yes, I will be doing one at some point, but I don't have like a concrete time set aside for it yet. Oh, it came out in 2011, 255 AD. Well, never mind. Jan says, hi, checking in late, but I'll watch the replay. Hope everyone is planning to get the next COVID booster. Happy Friday. Yes, I am planning. Again, just like with the My Adventures with Superman video, I don't know exactly when, but I do have a general plan. I do have an intention to get the booster coming up soon. Yannick Muller says, I recently rewatched Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in the cinema. Any thoughts on the film? I actually was born on the day David Lynch was booed for it in Cannes. Good day for me, less so for David. I like Fire Walk with Me. I don't like it as much as the first season of the Twin Peaks series. And I don't like it as much as most other David Lynch movies. Like, it's not one of my favorite David Lynch movies. But I have some appreciation for it. Like, I like parts of it. And I mean, it's, you know, there are certain qualities that it has that are in most David Lynch movies that I really, really admire and enjoy. But I wouldn't call it like one of Lynch's greatest works, but I like it. It has its charms, I guess, if that's even the right word. Jonathan Stewart says, more MacGyver reviews. Watched the reboot, but didn't like it as much. Yeah, I would like to do more MacGyver reviews as well. Maybe in the next month or so I'll do one. Maybe, actually, I was thinking maybe I'll try to see if I can do another like Halloween themed one for next month. Maybe I can do one about Penny Parker, the episode where Penny Parker lives in a haunted house. Because that's a fun episode. That would be a good Halloween show, I think. But yeah, you know, because I did one. Yeah, I did the Murdoch one where I did the Phantom of the Opera one, right? Yeah, I did the Phantom of the Opera one. But anyway, yeah, and there's, I mean, even beyond that, there's, yeah, I've only done a handful of those MacGyver reviews. Again, they don't really get very good views, but I do really enjoy doing them. So yes, I will do more MacGyver reviews at some point soon as well too. 255 AD asks, in your opinion, what's the upper limit of a character being redeemable? An anime I watch is trying to redeem someone who ignored all his kids that didn't inherit his powers and hit his wife. I mean, it's case by case. You know, like, I haven't watched that show. I don't know that character, so it's hard for me to say just based on your description. It's, you know, it's difficult to draw like a hard and fast line and say, well, if a character does this, then that's it. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, like, okay, if they're like a Nazi, right? If they're a Nazi, then it's pretty hard to say, oh, I think they can still come back from this. No. But other than that, like, it's hard to know where the line actually is. Steve Smiling says, Perfect Strangers is pretty schmaltzy, but Bronson Pinchot and Mark Lynn-Baker have amazing chemistry. That's it. That's the whole show. Like, if you watch Perfect Strangers, and I love Perfect Strangers, Perfect Strangers was a horribly written show. It wasn't just schmaltzy. It was corny. The jokes were usually not all that smart. It was a poor show in many ways. But the acting of the two leads, the comic timing of Bronson Pinchot and Mark Lynn Baker, and their delivery of their dialogue, the way they could spin gold out of straw, the way they could turn a phrase I just heard today on Netflix. I was watching one of the episodes of the Wrestlers series the Wrestlers series on Netflix, the documentary series about OVW, where Al Snow said he used the phrase "turning shit into shoe polish," which I'd never heard before, but that's what Mark Lynn Baker and Bronson Pinchot did very, very often on Perfect Strangers. They turned shit into shoe polish with their timing and their delivery and their amazing comic chemistry with one another. It was so good that it lifted the show up and made it a fun show to watch and an entertaining show, despite the poor quality of many, in fact, I would say most of the scripts. Yeah, they were extraordinary. Dana says, what about Misery as far as King adaptations? Yeah, Misery is good. I like Misery. I don't know if I would put it like super high as far as like great movies. But God, Kathy Bates is terrific in it. So yeah, I think Misery is a good one. 255 AD says, should I have said, if you don't mean it, don't bloody say it, even if it caused an argument? I mean, if you thought the argument was worth it, yeah, I mean, that's kind of up to you. If you thought it was worth starting an argument there, then yeah, absolutely say that. It's a completely fair thing to say. It's a completely fair thing to say. Jonathan Stewart says, why does Sisko not get the same level of judgment for sending Worf to kill Gowron as Janeway gets for killing Tuvix? I think there's a couple reasons. Even though I think Janeway is in the wrong there, I mean, I think there's a lot of sexism that goes into any judgment of Janeway. You just can't get away from. There are people who insist they're not being sexist and then will say the most sexist things about Captain Janeway. So I think that's part of it. I think also Voyager was generally perceived as a much poorer show than Deep Space Nine was. So Captain Sisko ordering Worf to kill Gowron in the context of a very, very good episode comes across a little different than Captain Janeway killing Tuvix in an episode of a mostly mediocre show. And also, Sisko sent Worf after Gowron to do what he did because it was thought to have had serious ramifications for the war and for the relationship between the Federation and the Klingons. Like, there was a lot at stake. There was no reason why Janeway had to kill Tuvix other than she wanted to, because she wanted to bring her friends back. So the stakes were much lower. There were no like pressing external forces on Janeway making her feel like I have no choice but to do this. So I think that makes a difference as well. Yes, Knit and Crochet Tiger. Yes, Mark Lynn Baker is She-Hulk's dad on the Disney Plus She-Hulk series, and he's fantastic. He's so good. I was so happy to see him, and I was so happy to see that he got funny stuff to do. And it was like, oh, it's so good to see him, and he's funny. Yeah, it's great. Oh, Kirak 2011. Yeah, Stand By Me. That's a good one, too. Yeah, Stand By Me is a Stephen King adaptation. The original Pet Sematary is all right. I kind of enjoy the original Pet Sematary more for its sort of so bad it's good qualities. Like, I don't know if I would call it like a legitimately good movie, but it's a hell of a lot of fun to watch. Yeah, well, Kirak, with Sisko allowing Garrick to do In the Pale Moonlight, that's the same situation. Like, Sisko is doing that for what he perceived to be a greater good, you know. Ooh, Jan, yes. Solidarity with all workers and special shout out to strikers fighting for justice. Yes, let's not forget. Now, you know, the screen actors and writers here in the United States have been on strike for months and continue to strike for their rights and for their fair wages. And now The United Auto Workers are also going on strike, and they're striking against all three major American auto manufacturers at once, which is, I think, the first time that's ever happened, or at least the first time it's happened for a very, very long time. So best of luck to them, and all the support and all the solidarity in the world to them as well. And may they also hold out until they get every last goddamn thing they're asking for, because they deserve it. Dana says, what are some really good movies that you find really scary? It's a short list because, like, there aren't that many movies that I find, like, legitimately scary. I would say, I mean, even though it's become kind of a cliche now, and we make fun of it a lot, and made fun of it a lot back then, too. When I saw The Blair Witch Project in the theater, that left me with a feeling of like a pit in my stomach when it was over. Like, that one really got to me on a physical level. And to this day, I still really like that movie. I think it's very effective and very well done. Like, it's really easy to make fun of, and it's really easy to kind of mock and take apart. But man, when I was sitting in that movie theater watching that movie in 1999, it got me. Like, it got me. It worked. So I would put the original Blair Witch Project very high on the list. And then, there are movies that are kind of like, that are scary in more of like in more of an existential way, that don't necessarily give me like a feeling of being frightened when I watch them, but are scary in more of a conceptual sense. I love Let the Right One In. Let the Right One In is a brilliant film. And is scary in a lot of ways, and is also beautiful and poetic in a lot of ways. And it's just an exquisite film. But yeah, there aren't really that many movies I can think of that are, I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of great horror movies that I can think of, but I don't know if I would necessarily call most of them like actually scary. They're just really, really well done. Like, I love 28 Days Later, I think is fantastic. I don't know if I would actually say it's scary when I watch it. I'm not scared when I watch it, but it's brilliant. It's wonderful. Keurig 2011 says, have I seen Lady in White? No, I don't believe I have. Michael Handeline, what King movie adaptation takes the crown for so bad it's good? It's got to be Maximum Overdrive, doesn't it? Maximum Overdrive. Which King not only wrote, but also directed. I mean, yeah, it's got to be. I think it's got to be Maximum Overdrive. 255 that's pretty funny. I don't have a problem with Janeway because she's a woman. I just think Bernie would have been a better leader. That's good. Yeah, I think you have made that before, but it's a good joke. Andrew Klang says, do you have a favorite Simpsons episode or joke? Favorite episode? Maybe the John Waters one. Homer's Phobia is a good one. I mean, is a great one. Or Homer's Enemy, the Frank Grimes one. That's a great one, too. Favorite joke? It's really hard to think of a favorite Simpsons joke because, like, I still will use, I mean, ask Dana, when Dana and I talk on the phone, like, almost, like, maybe every other conversation we have, like, something one of us says will remind me of a Simpsons quote or a Simpsons joke. Like, I mean, there are so many that are just in my brain all the time. It's hard to pick a favorite. I love one from, a lot of them are from the early Halloween episodes, because those Simpsons Halloween specials for the first 5 or 6 years were just absolutely can't miss. I love in the Dracula one, when they find out that Mr. Burns is the master vampire, and Lisa says, to save everyone, Mr. Burns is the head vampire, so you have to kill Mr. Burns. And Homer says, kill my boss? Do I dare live out the American dream? There's another one from one of the Simpsons Halloween shows when Homer keeps going back in time when he accidentally turns his toaster into a time machine. And every time he goes back in time, he accidentally like kills a dinosaur or a bug or does something to set off a butterfly effect that changes the future. And he goes back once and he's being extra careful and he doesn't want to step on anything and he doesn't want to hurt anything. And he's like hopping around to avoid stepping on little critters and bugs and he avoids everything. And then he gets to the edge of the sea when the first fish is crawling out of the sea onto land and Homer falls down and falls onto the fish and squashes the fish. And Homer realizes what he's done and he shakes his head and he goes, "Oh, I wish I hadn't killed that fish." So, you know, there are too many, honestly. There are too many to name one. Oh, the Langoliers. That's a good one, Stephen. Yes, the Langoliers is so bad it's good. Yes. And Andrew, directed by Coke. Yes, that's probably true. Yes. Maximum Overdrive. The credit for directing it went to Stephen King, but it was actually directed by Cocaine. Did Nathan Rabin make that joke? Yeah. Oh, Some Random Geek. That's a great one. Yes. Don't blame me. I voted for Kodos. That's a great one. And also in that same episode when they've taken the shapes of Bob Dole and Bill Clinton and, Bob Dole, the alien Bob Dole is giving a speech and he says, "Abortions for all." And people boo him. And he says, "Very well. No abortions for anyone." And they boo him. And he's flustered for a second. And then he goes, "Very well. Abortions for some. Miniature American flags for others." And everybody cheers. That satisfies them. And then they're doing the interview. You see, you get me started on The Simpsons. They're doing the election day interview with the candidates, and the reporter is talking to the alien Bob Dole, and they say, "What do you think? You know, who should people vote for? Why should people vote for you today, Senator Dole?" And he says, "It doesn't matter who you vote for, because no matter which of us wins, your planet is doomed, doomed." And Kent Brockman like turns back to the camera and he goes, "An uncharacteristically sunny response from Senator Dole." So yeah. Anyway, JMB the Scorpio episode. That's also a great one. Jacques raining donuts is a good one from that same time travel segment. And I think there was another one from one of the Halloween shows. It's where Homer sells his soul to the devil for a donut, but he never finishes the donut, so he doesn't actually give his soul to the devil. But then he goes downstairs one night, half asleep, looking for a late night snack, and he opens the refrigerator, which contains the final piece of his soul donut. And there's even a sign on it that says "Homer's soul donut, do not eat." And Homer sleepily like reaches in and picks it up and goes, "Forbidden donut," and eats it. So, yeah. So anyway, I believe I will call the festivities to a close. See, people are going to start throwing in Simpsons quotes, and it's going to like. I'm going to be on. Oh, Bradley Smith is Punk doing commentary for MMA tonight? Well, good for him. I know he was doing that before. Good for him. Something tells me he'll be okay. Something tells me he'll land on his feet. So if anybody has any final questions, Kirok, that's a great one too. When Homer gets hair in a promotion with his dad. That was one of the first, I thought that was maybe from season 2, maybe even season 1. It's a really early episode, but it's very good with Harvey Fierstein doing the guest voice. Anyway, if anybody has any final questions, get ready to go ahead and line them up in the chat, and I will get back to them in a second after I wrap up the links and stuff and the plugs. And also, please pay attention to Geek putting in links for folks who need a helping hand in the chat. So, if you enjoy this live stream, if you enjoy the work that I do here on YouTube, and you would like to help me out and help me continue to do that, you can do so by becoming a patron of this channel at patreon.com/Steve Shives. Or if you don't want to become a patron, you can also click the join button right here on the YouTube channel and become a member of the YouTube channel. And either way, it really helps me out to continue to produce content and, you know, keep the lights on and pay the bills and stuff, because YouTube is my full-time job, and I make a living off of these videos that I produce. And it would be a lot more difficult, if not impossible, to do that if I did not have my wonderful patrons and members supporting the channel. So if you enjoy what I do here and it means something to you and you think you can afford it, you can afford $1 a month or $5 a month or $10 a month or whatever, please consider becoming a patron or a member. I really, really appreciate it. And one of the benefits that you can take advantage of if you do become a member or a patron at any level, from $1 a month on up to whatever, is that you get to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. On the Monday before a Ask Away live stream, I will send out a link to my channel members and my Patreon patrons that you can use to access the Google form that I use to collect these questions that I answer in the first part of the show. And I always answer the first part of every live stream of every Ask Away is answering patron and member questions. So if that seems interesting to you, you know, consider becoming a patron or a member. And yeah. In addition to that, if you enjoy my YouTube work, you might also enjoy the podcasts that I am a co-host on. Jason Harding and I co-host a movie review podcast called Late Seating that was mentioned earlier by some random geek, because our new episode came out today, and we are reviewing the classic 1990s anime film, Perfect Blue. So if you would like to hear what we have to say about Perfect Blue, check out the new episode of Late Seating, which is out now. And also, in addition to Late Seating, Jason and I and Dana, who is in the chat, Dana Cole, we all team up together to do a Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast called The Ensign's Log. And if you are a fan of Star Trek and you like, especially like funny kind of Star Trek stuff, I think you'll really enjoy our show as well. So that is linked in the description, as well as Late Seating. So please give a listen to our podcasts. And if you do, I hope you will enjoy them. Now let me turn back to the live chat real quick to see if I have any last questions that I have not addressed. And, oh, a super chat from Stephen Dopp, who says, no question, just thanks. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate that. At 255 AD, I saw your comment about it being conservative propaganda. Like, I haven't watched the episode for a while, so I can't really comment on that specifically. I mean, it doesn't sound completely unreasonable now that I'm remembering back to the episode. But I would have to actually watch it again to have anything more specific to say. And Jacques Poulimer says, thank you, Steve, for all you do, and hugs to everyone. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Philip Key, I love the Simpsons quote. This is from the Scorpio episode. Homer, on your way out, if you could kill someone, it would help me out a lot. Oh, yes. Dana, why what? Why what? Is that the question? Is that the final question you want to ask? Is it just a generic why? Someone said doo-doo. Yes, I know. I saw it. I figured if he was trying to get me to say doo-doo, I would let him have it. I mean, you know. What? What's wrong with that? We're all adults here, right? We're all adults here. Anyway, I think that's it. So thank you all for watching. And just a reminder, we mentioned it on Wednesday, but just for those of you who like to join us, that's what I thought, Danny, you just asked. Just why? Just in general, why? In like a special Scotty kind of way, right? For those of you who watch us on Wednesday, Dana and I doing our Trek Reluctantly live stream, we will be off again next week. So no Trek Reluctantly next week, but we'll be back the following week and watching Deep Space Nine again. So I'll be back to do and I'll also be back to do another one of these in 2 weeks. And next week is on Monday is going to be a new Best Superman Ever video. And then on Wednesday is going to be the next Trek Actually video, which will be on the question of what does Star Trek actually say about euthanasia. So that'll be on Wednesday next week. So that's what's coming up in the near future. Thank you all so very much for joining me. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for those of you who are supporters for your support, and for those of you who were generous with super chats tonight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the questions and for hanging out. So have a good night. Have a good weekend. And I'll see you later. Take care, everybody.